This week, we have a special report for you from Seattle where populist badasses Lawrence Lessig and Marianne Williamson talk money and politics and the American media with the help of Killswitch, a documentary featuring Lessig, Aaron Swartz, and Ed Snowden. Plus, we bring you a luminary waterfront or rather on the water action organized by the Shell No Coalition. And in other news, help stop the fast track towards a corporate coup, and artist Stephanie McMillan has a special treat for all you activists having a rough day. But first, thank you, apathy. This is corporate porn. Don't you just get off on the loss of life, the trouble and strife, the needy and sick, the tired and poor? Shoot your load on the last low of depravity, the sinkhole of morality. Then cross yourself and hope to die. Wash your sins on a whim, forgive and forget, nothing personal, it's business. Casual. And business is good. This detailed charade, places, let's role play. You be the terrorists, or the thugs in the hood, or the vapid distraction like pop stars in fashion. Phew. Wait, getting too excited, flush with the rush of not one crook indicted or terrorist cited, the spying, the lying. Fuck, it's so hot like those blindfolds and chains, so deep that they're fixed on your soul and your brain. A ball gag to keep you from speaking the truth. Listen, I'll ruin you. No shades of gray, just black and white. Washed. There is no safety word, and blowing the whistle only makes me go harder, farther than you can handle. But even torture gets droll, boring and old, like whack-a-mole, finding new ones to break, a thirst that won't slake. Maybe it's addiction, a vicious conviction to hate, rape, and kill, to drill to the bone, dig to the soul. Your Honor, I can't be blamed. American Psycho, American Idol, one epic in prime time. Yes, that's your new show. I'll be the star. No life behind bars will make me seem sane. And I don't need to be taught how to hate. Come on, it's really no place for someone so white and high on the food chain. Besides, as much as I get off on pain, you get off on the insane. You like the extreme, you feel alive in the fear, so juxtaposed to the dreary life you lead. Now scene. Cameras are off and I've done my piece. My latest display of hate, greed, and pain. Somewhere in Africa, I think, or maybe Detroit. There's really no point in keeping it straight. Each week just the same, and I really must say this American stage is one hell of a place to be saved. I'd like to thank the media, who always took my side, my sponsors who always took pride in the blood and the bombs, the patriot songs, and rampantly racist, degrading, sexist homicide. But most of all, I'd like to thank you. The quiet masses, so simple and passive, you make it possible for sociopaths like me to be free. For corporate porn to be the norm. You're the only thing that keeps me going. If I could love, I'd write you a poem. What you choose not to do, rise up and scream, fuck you, is why I'm still here. Thank you for not crying resistance, for no tweets or marching in the streets, for not acting out. Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. And that's a siren. And we have yet another special edition episode for you. Last week, I headed to Seattle to take in the activist sites and get a scoop on the badassery taking place there, on land and on sea. First up, last Thursday, the Get Money Out organization New Hampshire Rebellion, along with Occupy.com, hosted the Seattle premiere of Killswitch, a documentary on digital rights under a for-sale government featuring Aaron Swartz and Edward Snowden. Harvard professor and activist Lawrence Lessig, who also appears in the film, was there along with author and lecturer Marianne Williamson to discuss the issues laid out in the film and examine real solutions. At the event, I had the chance to talk to both of them before the premiere. Take a look. So we are here with Marianne Williamson. It's before the Killswitch event on Thursday. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us real fast. I'm curious, why did you feel that you wanted to be at this event and introduce it and speak with Lessig?
I think that getting the money out of politics is the greatest moral challenge of our generation. It is the cancer underlying all the other cancers. Until we deal with that on a fundamental level, I personally think that means a constitutional amendment, then the devolution and the multinational corporate takeover of our country, our democracy, will continue. So I think that enough of us get that that's the challenge now, and we need to move into action.
And you ran for office in California. Now, there's sort of like a two-pronged effort that's going on. You mentioned the amendment. How do you feel that the grassroots movement and the systemic movement, as in legislation and running for office, how do you feel that those can work together to combat the corrupting influence of money in politics?
It's a multidimensional problem, and it's got to be a multidimensional answer. There's a limit to what you can do from the sidelines. We cannot leave elected office out of this, and I think that's one of the problems that people on the left make too much. People on the right do not make that mistake. They understand that you have to do more than prepare activists. You have to prepare candidates. We have to start running on these issues. That's why I'm such a passionate supporter of Bernie Sanders. That's why I'm a passionate supporter of Alan Grayson. This idea that we can do it all without actually addressing that issue is naive at best. So I having run for office, my faith is even greater. I know that there's a listening for all this. These are the issues I was talking about in my campaign. And there's no platform like a congressional campaign or a senatorial campaign or a presidential campaign for actually discussing these issues. The fact that I had never run for office before and didn't have the kind of knowledge and savvy necessary to actually pull off a political win is a separate issue. I clearly didn't, but did I experience a real listening? Because like in every other area that we're experiencing around this, people are listening and people are ready, absolutely. We definitely need radical truth tellers right now. Lawrence Lessig is a radical truth teller. The people in the film Killswitch are radical truth tellers. It's kind of like an alcoholic family system where the kids are going crazy because nobody's just saying what's actually happening. And now, there are people who are saying this is what's actually happening. Until we face what's actually happening, we will not be able to solve it. We will not be able to fix those problems. When you see people like Sanders, like Grayson, and others who are doing it, we must support them. We can't just stay on a parallel track. So this is a presidential election year. The corporatocracy, or whatever words we want to use it, will either solidify their power with this election or find their power deeply challenged by this election. And I know which side I'm on, and all of us are on who believe these things. And I can't think of anything more important than showing up for that process this year and next.
And how would you tell people to get involved? I mean, I know that a lot of people, particularly my age and the age group from 18 to 30, say, well, I don't vote because it doesn't matter. What would you say to them, particularly, as you said, this is such a pivotal time and this issue is coming up more and more with these candidates. What would you say to them in order for them to get involved?
Not voting is a vote. Absolutely, don't kid yourself. You know, in France, they have a saying, if you don't do politics, politics do you. If you don't vote, you're voting for those who most represent the things you most detest, number one, and they're thrilled that you're not voting. Why do you think they're working so hard to suppress voting rights throughout the country? And the deepest level, you know, it's not this protest, because I'm protesting by not voting. No, you're not. It's spoiled brat behavior posing as something else. And also people say, well, I don't know what to do. Google it. I mean, really. If you want a certain kind of bag, a certain kind of color, a certain kind of size, you have a way of finding it on the internet. You can find out what to do. And when it comes to getting money out of politics, Google money out of politics. Google any of these issues. It's there. And that, by the way, that's one of the reasons it's so important we save the independence and the safety of the internet, because this is where people can get information just like that. I also think when more people run, who are representing these ideas in ways that some of the people you're mentioning can relate to, that I feel a lot of people who voted for me in my campaign were those who had not been doing that too often before.
Absolutely. And of course, as she said, the internet is that platform that allows you to find out information about and everything from a bag that you want to the democracy that you want.
You can find it if you want, yeah.
So just real quick, finally, I'm curious, how do you feel, because the money in politics issue is often quoted as being really obtuse and like abstract, like, well, I don't really know how that affects me in my daily life. My issue is the environment, or my issue is women's rights. How do you draw that direct connection?
Well, hello, if your issue is the environment, understand that the things that are happening that you most oppose are happening because of the fossil fuel industry. And the fossil fuel industry is able to dominate policymaking in Washington because of the money they're able to spend on candidacies. Hello, what don't you understand here? And I think many people, it's so interesting because if it's a public issue, it will come around to your private life. One of the things that I've been sadly amused by is how many people are experiencing their political awakening through the food issue. I mean, there's a limit past which just drinking green juice isn't going to do it because of Monsanto, because of Syngenta, because of Dow, because of all the GMOs and the bioengineering. So you thought that didn't have anything to do with you, huh? The complete takeover of the EPA didn't have anything to do with you, huh? The complete takeover of the FDA didn't have anything to do with you, huh? Well, yes, it does. And I think people are realizing that. But once again, the cancer underlying all that is the undue influence of money. The way politicians basically make this deal. Help me get elected, which means financial. It's a legalized system of bribery that we have, a legalized system of corruption. And then I will soft pedal it on environmental regulations. I will soft pedal it on food regulation and GMOs and so forth. So we know now, and we have to harness the extraordinary power that lies in the fact that so many of us now do know it. Now we have to do what it takes.
Okay, so we are here with Lawrence Lessig, and it is the Killswitch premiere in Seattle. Thank you so much for taking the time. So I just want to start off by asking, quite simply, why are you here?
So this is a very important film. It was a great opportunity to introduce it to a critical community for this reform movement. So I flew out this morning to be able to present tonight and go back tomorrow morning.
And of course, your schedule is insane. I don't know how you do it all. So this, it's being posed as the sort of getting money out and how that coincides with American media. What is that connection for you?
Well, I think the most important thing to recognize about the way in which money affects politics is the concentration of funders. The number of relevant funders, people who give enough money to matter, is a tiny, tiny fraction of the 1%. And what that means is we've set up this fundamentally unequal process for representing Americans. We first have politicians spend half their time obsessively focused on a fraction of the 1%, so they raise the money they need to run for office, and then presumptively they spend the rest of their time thinking about us. But that is a completely corrupted process for what the framers imagined a representative democracy would be, and that's the thing to keep focused on, how we concentrate the funding of elections.
And how does that bleed into the idea of digital rights and the power of the internet?
Well, the internet has the potential. Indeed, I think it's the only tool we've got to be able to push back against this structure of concentrated power. And many of the issues that the internet is struggling with, whether it's the fight against network neutrality, or it's the TPP, or any of the other issues about making the internet accessible and guaranteeing access and privacy in that context, are issues that are fundamentally affected by the corruption of our political process. So the internet both depends on fixing this problem and is the only thing we've got that could fix this problem.
And of course, the interests of the 0.1% are fighting against an open and free internet.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the interest of business is always to concentrate its influence and in a kind of obvious way to protect itself against competitors in the next generation. And the way they do that is both to corrupt government and also to corrupt the structures of the way the competitive market is supposed to operate. The internet, in its architecture, embedded this open platform for competition and access. And obviously there's a big push to compromise that platform.
Where do you feel that we're at right now, since net neutrality passed, but we're looking at the TPP? Where do you feel that we're at in the fight for digital rights and an open and free internet?
Well, I'm incredibly excited. The internet's kind of on a roll. If you think of like SOPA and then network neutrality and the fight against TPP and the fight to stop the Patriot Act from being renewed, these are an incredible series of victories. And what's happening is as each of these victories occurs, the capacity of the network to organize and to actually be effective is growing. And so my hope is that through this practice of increasing success, we can get to a place where the net is able to take on what is, I think, the ultimate, most difficult but most important fight.
And speaking of like the fight for digital rights or indeed to get money out, there seem to be different efforts that are being highlighted tonight. You have organizations like New Hampshire Rebellion, and of course you have the May Day PAC. Marianne Williamson ran for office, but you also have the Backbone campaign and Occupy.com. How do you feel that this legislative path and this activist path, how do you feel that those need to combine to push this issue forward?
I'm a big believer in lots of different groups pushing in lots of different ways. We can't imagine, there could never be a successful single movement with a single leader because there's such a diversity in America that needs to be able to identify and connect with a vision of the movement that's closest to them, and that's fine. I don't think what we need here is a commander-in-chief. We need more of a therapist-in-chief, somebody who can talk the movement along and coordinate, not so much in lockstep, but in sympathy, the different pressures that have to be brought to bear to bring about the kind of change that we want.
So what would you say to somebody who might be on the fence about activism or isn't currently involved? Is there sort of like a checklist on how to help push us forward, particularly with an election year coming up and this issue of money in politics being so central?
Well, I think 2016 is going to be a critical year. And it's a critical year especially for younger people. If you think of every major problem that we as a nation cannot address, whether it's climate change or the debt or the economy that is stalled or healthcare that's still wildly too expensive. These are all problems that really affect the youth primarily, not really people my generation. I mean, climate change is terrible. I am absolutely committed to the need to address it. But, I'm going to be long gone before it manifests itself in a way that would really affect day-to-day life for me. But my kids will be directly affected by this. So I think the thing that people need to recognize if they're not engaged is that that's part of the plan for them not to be engaged. Because if they were engaged, then my generation couldn't pass off the cost of our excess to you and your generation, right? So the point is to recognize not just the idealism, because there's lots of idealism, but the interest, the self-interest, the generational interest, the interest in the future, to have a future, which right now, the way my generation has screwed things up, I'm quite skeptical we're going to be proud of that future.
And it's sort of a difficult thing for people in my generation. I think there's this feeling that my vote doesn't count, and why does it bother? Because I'm, the 0.1%, they're not listening to me anyways. There's almost this cognitive dissonance. Like, I know what's happening, but I'm not going to get involved because what does it matter? What would you say to that?
Well, yeah, you're right. Your vote doesn't count. But it's like sitting there with the television remote and like, oh, geez, the remote's not working. You don't just sit there forever. You get up and fix the remote or fix the TV or do something about it, and that's exactly it. I'm not telling people they ought to go out and vote in the existing system. The existing system sucks. It's absolutely a fundamentally unequal structure for allocating power across our society. And we've got to change that. We don't have to participate in it. We've got to change it. Change it so it is an equal system of equal representation. And once it's that, then people have a reason to turn up to vote. But right now, why would you? I mean, it doesn't matter what you do. Except it does matter what you do to change the system so that it begins to make sense.
To learn more about the New Hampshire Rebellion, check out nhrebellion.org. And to stay up to date on the film Killswitch, coming out later this summer, check out killswitchthefilm.com. Moving on, Seattle, if you remember from a couple of weeks ago, is the home base for both the evil and the awesome, namely Shell's Arctic drilling rig and the activist response. This past week while I was in Seattle, pardon the pun, but the second wave of kayaktivism rolled out in Seattle's harbor, this time to the sound of music and the light from a floating lantern procession. In a timely celebration of World Environment Day, activists led by Backbone campaign held a vigil for our beaten and bruised planet. Complete with a seahorse, Arctic Angel, Light Brigade, and music courtesy of a solar-powered barge. For those who couldn't make it, here's some of the best and brightest moments from that evening. Take a look. Arctic destroyer could leave at any time, starting this week, so activists are now occupying Terminal 5, where the rig is moored. Be sure to stay up to date and help raise awareness via the hashtag #ShellKnow and shellknow.org. As a vicious tie-in to money in politics, Arctic drilling, and so much more, be sure to stay up to date on the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, as big business goons and corporate shills in the House are planning a vote on fast track this week. Legislation that would allow for corporate trade deals like the TPP to be rushed through Congress with only an up or down vote and no amendments. For more on the TPP fast track and to get in touch with your representatives, check out TPP Media March and Flush the TPP. Now, as you've seen, and as I've said before, activism is fun. Be it illuminated seahorses, movie screenings, concerts, or beach parties. But the issues we're up against are less than fun. Whether it's the TPP, money in politics, or Arctic drilling, digging deep into the ills and evils, the bad news and worst news can drain you. Cartoonist Stephanie McMillan felt this and decided to use her passion for both activism and art to create inspiration for those fighting the good fight. Take a look. So this latest project, it's not your typical political art. It's inspirational pieces for activists. So talk a little bit about the inspiration for the inspiration.
Well, I found a lot of people who are trying to get politically active or who seem to want to get discouraged very easily because it seems like they feel alone or kind of hopeless or things seem very dire and overwhelming. So I was seeing that there are so many different books and calendars and pictures for people who want success at making money, being successful, getting a relationship, whatever. Why can't we have that too? You know, we need encouragement. We need to have mutual support. So I think those forums are very appealing, but the content wasn't there that I saw that we really needed as organizers.
So these are to inspire activists, of course, who get tired and drained. But are these also to inspire people who aren't politically active to get politically active?
Definitely, yeah. Those who are kind of sitting on the fence, maybe looking one toe in the water. It's encouragement that, you know, we're here for you. We're not alone. We're all in this together.
I'd like to talk also about your book, Capitalism Must Die. So why specifically this topic, and your thoughts behind the statement that it cannot be voted away or escaped, and where do you think people should go in terms of next steps? What are your options as activists or just as citizens?
Well, the reason that I tackled that topic is that I see a lot of people fighting the different effects and conditions of capitalism, the different forms of oppression that it cements, ecocide, different particular social problems. But if we don't tie those things together and target the system as the root cause of all of these things, then we're never going to be able to solve any of them. So I thought it was really important to try to bring that idea out more. And also, I found a lot of people who did say they are against capitalism, but they don't really understand what it is, because most of the writing about it is extremely academic and long and kind of boring. So I thought I would try to remedy that and make it basically write an introduction. So how capitalism works, what are the different concepts associated with it, what is surplus value, how does capital accumulate, and write it in a way that is accessible and put cartoons that illustrate the concepts too, to sort of, you know, utilize more different parts of the brain to kind of get the concept in a more well-rounded way, visually and with text together, which I think it's a different way of knowing something.
And of course, you know, art speaks to you in a way that simple words or even, you know, even a conversation can't. It really gets to sort of an emotional cell in your being that is awakened, and then you have this sort of connection that's deeper than just, you know, reading Chomsky, even though I adore Chomsky. You're raising money right now to basically produce the 365 days of inspirational messages, and I will of course put a link up to that so everyone can go there and support it. Are there any other projects that you're working on or things that we should know about so we can plug those as well?
Well, I have a website with years worth of comics on them. Some of them are kind of incompleted projects that I still plan to put in book form. Some of them are just standing on their own, and some I have already made into books. But if people want to look through that, there are different focuses. Like there's a recent book that I illustrated that somebody else wrote about climate change and the science of climate change and the political implications. There's a series of comics I've done on sweatshops and workers organizing specifically in Haiti around higher wages. And I'm also working on coming up. The next project is probably going to be notes for revolutionary militants, which are a little bit less inspirational, but more politically focused, like talking about what are some of the problems and issues we need to be thinking about as we're organizing. I think they'll be more practical in a way.
To help Stephanie release her 365 daily affirmations for revolutionary proletarian militants calendar, go to her site linked below. And that's all we have time for this week. Thank you so much for watching. Please spread and share this with all of your friends, foes, and people you don't know. And as always, check out the last slide to see all the sites that I mentioned in this show. There will also be a link to help support Occupy.com and the delicious dissent delivered daily thanks to donations like yours. It is a 501c3, so anything you can contribute is tax deductible and hugely appreciated. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. From Seattle to DC, good night and act out.